Spring has finally sprung in Nova Scotia, which means more trips to the beaches and rivers for us in the near future. But first, we have some business to take care of in the form of the Makers Challenge. This year, we are pulling out all the stops. Terry's going to be involved. The boys are going to have input. I can't promise you it's going to be great, but what I can tell you is that it's going to be a piece of cake. Let's go. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We've been invited by Theo again this year to take part in the Makers Challenge. Over the past year, we've been doing a lot of sea maggot videos, and a lot of viewers on the channel have been making comments that, oh, they're so delicious looking and, you know, it looks like cake. So we thought we would run with that. We're gonna make a sea maggot cake today, but we're not just gonna make any sea maggot cake. We're gonna make a triple layer sea maggot cake. The boys right now are looking through our buckets full of rocks, trying to find some adequate pieces of sea maggot that we can use. We're not sure whether or not we're going to use a square piece to cut a square piece of cake or the traditional triangle piece of cake, but we're gonna take a look to see what we have first, and then we're gonna make a decision based on the pieces that we have and see what we can do with them. Okay, so here's what me and the boys finally settled on. These pieces here, I think, are our best pieces that we have to help build this piece of cake for this project. Like I said before, we can either go with a square piece of cake or a traditional wedge piece of cake. I would like to do the traditional wedge piece of cake. I just think it'll look cooler. The problem with doing that is that some of these pieces are pretty fractured up, and cutting them into a wedge, it may fracture them to the point where we can't use them. However, I think that we have to give it a shot because the traditional wedge style piece of cake, I think, is going to look cooler. So we're going to give it a shot to go with the triangles. Of course, we want this piece of cake to be as big as possible. Who wants a small piece of cake, right? You always want a big piece of cake. So we're going to try to make this thing big. What we have here is various size pieces of colorful looking seams. And I think the most important seam that we have is the jelly sea maggot seam. Now, these are two smaller pieces. I believe that we can use these to our advantage. I like the fact that these pieces have the white on the outside of the chalcedony, this red and blue chalcedony in the middle. I think that's going to look really good as a middle layer of the cake. What we need to do is we'll need to trim off the basalt here right down to the white. Also, that'll leave us a nice flat surface for the top and the bottom layers to adhere to. These two pieces will make like two halves of a triangle. So we're going to try to make two halves of a triangle, glue them together. We'll form that as a template for the top and bottom piece. So this is going to be the middle layer. So the top and bottom layer is going to consist of one of these other pieces now. We have this amethyst pegmatite from Halifax. Our buddy Terry gave us this piece. I love the color in this. It's white and purple. I think it'll look delicious. However, I don't know if we can get a nice triangle wedge out of this. We might be able to. We might. It's going to depend on what we get as a template out of this. I'm hoping to use this piece. Another great candidate is this sea maggot from Bass River. This piece is severely fractured up. So this is going to be one of those pieces that if we try to cut it into a triangle wedge, it's probably going to have some issues, especially if it's more of a tight wedge. This one may be a potential candidate for one of the layers. This is a piece of sea maggot that our buddy Terry gave us. This is from, I believe, Tree Rock, and it's really nice looking sea maggot. It's got some good reds in there, burgundies, and some nice agate details. This is a nice big piece, and it doesn't look too fractured up. There's some fractures in there, but there are some things we can do with the fracture pieces. We might have to treat it differently. Like we might have to finish it with some epoxy to get rid of some of the fractures. This is another great candidate because it's a nice big piece, and I think this will be easy to cut into a wedge later on. These pieces here, these three are smaller pieces. They got some really good details in them, but I think they might be too small. But I have them here on reserve in case we can use them. The first thing I think we need to do is we need to take this over the trim saw, cut this little thin layer of basalt off, flatten these edges out so that we have some flat edges up to the white quartz here. That'll get us started. Again, the goal is to make two half wedges here to form a bigger wedge. First, we need to cut this basalt off. So we'll take that over to the trim saw now. We'll start on that. I've removed the basalt off of the top of each piece of this jelly seam agate. And now I have this piece where I have the red in the middle and the white on either side. That's the reason why I wanted to use this as the middle layer of the cake, because I think the cake icing will be white. We're probably going to use like crushed quartz or something like that. White, I think, is going to be really good for simulating the icing in between the layers. Now we have to trim this into a half triangle wedge. Let's go do it and we'll take a look at the end results. Okay, so my worst fear was realized. We had a fracture and the tip of one of the wedges came off. But I think we're going to try to salvage this. I have some CA that I think we can use to CA this back on here. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, I guess. Okay, so I actually epoxied that off camera. That's been resting there for about an hour. And I put some accelerant on it so that it'll cure up faster. And now I'm going to put some CA on this and CA the wedges together so we can get our one solid pie wedge. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, so I've applied all the CA and I've wedged the two pieces together. I've CA'd it in between here so it's nice and snug. That little piece that came off here, I've CA'd that on there. We're going to take this to the flat lap. I'm going to polish this side and this side here. These are going to be the two display sides. This is going to be the back of the cake. This is going to have icing on it. We don't really care what this looks like. I can make that look even in the back. It's these sides here that we're mostly concerned with. I'm going to go ahead and take this to the flat lap now. I'm just going to do a high grit grinding disc. So this will be a 260 disc. I just want to get the saw marks out of here. If I epoxy this side and there's saw marks in it, I think the saw marks will show up in the epoxy. So we want to get all the saw marks out as much as we can before we do any epoxying. I'm going to do that, and there's some CA sticking out here that will grind down, as well as over here. You see it in the light there. This will be our template, so then we'll make our other top layer and our bottom layer with this wedge as the template. Okay, I've taken both of these sides now down to 260. They're feeling pretty good. I think the epoxy will show up pretty nice on that. We need to now use this as our template for the upper and lower layers. I've already done it on this piece. This is a piece of red flame seam agate. You can see it's really fractured up, which is why I think the epoxy is going to work great on this. This is another one of those pieces that we're going to run into some danger cutting it, especially in this triangle wedge here, because you can see it's pretty fractured. Run the risk of when we get to this triangle part here, the tip, it could fracture off. But again, we have some CA that we could use if it breaks off in a nice even point or something like that. We can do it. So basically all I did was I just took this and I traced it with my marker. That'll give me an outline on the saw, which I can cut this piece now, and it'll roughly be the same size as this. So we're going to take this piece over to the saw now and cut that. I'm also going to do the same thing to this Cape split seam agate that we have here. We're going to get as many layers as we can. I'm going to see if I can get a piece of this amethyst pegmatite in there as well. And then we have multiple layers that we can choose from to see which combination looks the best. First, I'm going to start off with this red flame. I'm going to go cut this on the saw, and then we'll get to doing the other pieces as well. Okay, so from that video you saw, I was cutting different pieces there. We tried to cut the piece of amethyst pegmatite, but it's just too brittle. It's too fractured up, way too fractured up. Looks really cool though, but yeah, it's not suitable for this project. So we'll set that one aside, do something different with it later on, another project maybe. So what I did was I ended up getting this piece of jasper. I ended up cutting a triangle wedge out of that. Nice piece here. That will be possible middle layer maybe. And we cut our Cape split seam agate. No fractures in that. There's cut really smooth. There's hardly any fractures in this piece. This is the red flame. This one's severely fractured, so the epoxy is going to have to do its job on this piece. And of course, this was our jelly seam agate from the original one we did there for the template. What I have coming up next is my buddy Terry's coming over, and he's going to show me his epoxy process and how he does it. Terry's going to be dropping by here shortly, and then we'll get started on that. So Terry's here. Terry's helped me with the resin, the epoxy. We're doing 3 pieces tonight. It's a 2-part epoxy. There's a hardener and a resin. You got to put equal parts in. Terry's brought a scale over. He's already mixed up a batch. So the pieces have to be level when we let them dry. So we set up this bucket, and we're going to wedge them in here so that they can dry overnight. It takes 24 hours for them to dry. So Terry's going to start on the first piece. He told me I was supposed to do it, but he's ended up doing it now.
Well, I'll do this one. You can do one. You can do the other 2. And we just got to make sure we put enough on to cover your, because we didn't sand all the saw marks right out.
Yeah, we didn't sand the saw marks.
I think the coat's on there heavy enough.
So I ended up not sanding these ones down to 260. We skipped it. I did this piece here to 260, but Terry thinks we can get away with it if we put a heavy coat on it.
I've done the same thing before. It's just a matter of keeping this level so it doesn't run off, and so you don't have any big blobs on one end and uneven on the other. I'm trying to eyeball it with some light behind it to see if there's any hot spot.
So what do we use the torch for?
You'll see it level out, right? It just kind of flashes it off, right? And this will work fine.
So Terry calls this flashing it off. It levels the epoxy out.
It's supposed to take the bubbles out and level everything out, right? It looks pretty fine to me. Here, eyeball that. Here, just move around. Can you see how the plane is on it?
Yeah, yeah.
That looks pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
I don't see any, dimples. Keep an eye on it for a minute, because after it settles for a minute, something might sink into the cracks, and you might see a little bubble.
So are we done with that one?
I would say, yeah. I'll hit them again, but you can situate that one. Another nice heavy coat. Yeah, do the whole thing. What do you want to put some more on? And go off the edges too, right? Yeah, that way. There you go. You can see them wet down.
More?
Oh yeah, it wouldn't hurt to put a little more on there. Go the opposite way.
Come back this way, maybe?
Yeah, just make it fairly even with the brush before we hit it with the heat.
Yeah, you can see it disappearing.
Doesn't look bad at all, We don't see any dry spots.
No.
That's what you got. It looks like you got a nice heavy coat on it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you can see how it just flattens it right out.
Right.
And this one didn't have any fractures.
Yeah. Now that one's going to be good. He's talking to himself, or is that brother?
Yeah, it's good. It's going. Yeah.
It does. Yeah.
That was good.
Okay.
We got Terry an honorary Rockhounding Life shirt.
Oh, cool! Right on, right on.
He's now official part of the Rockhounding Life family.
I'll wear it next time we all go out on the beach, for sure.
Anyway, Terry, thanks for coming out.
No problem, guys.
Thanks for coming and helping us with our project.
That up. Let me know how it goes.
Show
me the finished product.
Yeah, we'll let you know. Okay, so we have the 4 pieces with the one side all coated with epoxy, and this will cure for 24 hours, and then we will come back and do the other side. Thanks to Terry for coming over tonight and showing me how to do this. And I'm going to be on my own tomorrow night when we do the other side. And then we're going to decide which 3 we're going to go with. We're not going to go with all 4 for the cake. We're probably going to go for just 3, and we'll decide which combination looks the best after we get it all epoxied up. And then we'll go on to the next stage, which will be creating the icing for the cake. All right, so these have set for 24 hours, and they're dry. and they're looking pretty good. You see that one still has some fractures, but it's okay. So now I'm gonna mix up the resin solution again and do the other side. Okay, the epoxy has been applied to the other side now. These will set for 24 hours. We'll be back tomorrow night and we will begin to make the icing on the cake. So stay tuned for that. Okay, it's been 24 hours. These are done, both sides. We're gonna take a look at them here. This one turned out really good. Each one has a bad side and a good side. There's a little bit of a issue right here with the epoxy. It looks like there was a little bit of a drip underneath when we put this coat on. This side looks really good. So each piece actually has a good side and a bad side, so we're probably going to have to build the cake with all the good sides on one side and all the bad sides on the other, but that's okay. This one turned out all right, but there's a little bit of a spot we missed right there. This one here, you see there was some bubbling in it. This is what happens when you leave the bubbles in it. I didn't get all the bubbles out, so yeah, that's unfortunate. You can see some of the bubbles in it. This side turned out really great though. And this piece here, this side turned out really good. This is the jasper. And then on this side, we ended up having a little bubble right there. And there's a little bit of an imperfection there now, so it is what it is. I think we'll still be able to produce a pretty good end product. Anyway, those are the pieces. I'm happy with how they came out. They're ready to go. So now we just need to choose the three we're going to go with, and then we have to start making the icing. I think, personally, I like the red jasper to go in the middle. And I think these two pieces are just too nice right here to omit. So I think the odd one out is going to be the one we started with, which was the jelly sea maggot. I just don't think it turned out as nice as I was hoping. But we'll keep it and do something else with that later at a later date. So I think we're going to go with these three pieces. And I think we're going to go bottom layer, and then middle layer, and then top layer. But obviously we're going to have some icing in there. So let me show you now what my plan is for the icing. So for the icing, I think white will play best off of the colors that we have in the pieces here for the cake. I've got a piece of white dolomite here. It's got a little pink tinge to it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to smash and grind this up as fine as I can. This is a piece of quartz, but it's got a lot of impurities in it, you see. I think I'm going to try to go with the dolomite first. Plus, it's softer, so it'll break up easier. I don't want to spend all night smashing this up. So I'm going to go with this one. And for accessories, I think we're going to go with sprinkles on top. And I have an assortment of gemstones that we can use. I got some sapphires here, some rubies, got some emerald. I've got some garnets. And we will go ahead and sprinkle all that stuff on and kind of make a sprinkled kind of look on the top of the icing. So it's gonna be white icing with different colored sprinkles on it. I'm also going to be mixing this with some glow powder. I don't really care if it glows, but really what I like about the glow powder is that it's white, number one, and number two, I'm gonna be using CA for this to adhere to the rock. When I add the CA, it kind of gives it this nice glazed look. So I think it'll look like a really cool icing effect. We're going to mix the glow powder with our crushed dolomite so that we get a nice quantity of white material. And then we're going to CA it to the top of each piece and on the sides. So let's get to it and I'll take you through the steps. So one of the cool things about dolomite is that it has a rhombohedral cleavage. It'll break up into these rhombohedron crystals. And that works pretty cool for us because we could crush it really fine and it'll look like sugar. And that's kind of what we're going for. So if I can get it fine enough, I'm going to hopefully fill this jar full. It'll look like little sugar granules. And we could use that in our icing with our glow powder. So that's the kind of thing I'm going for here. But I'm going to keep smashing this stuff up and hopefully get it small enough to fill this jar. I think that'll be enough for our cake. I'm tired of smashing up this dolomite, so I've enlisted some help. This guy likes doing this sort of thing, don't you? Okay, let's bake this cake. Here I'm using this cardboard as spacer so that I can put icing in between each layer, starting with the bottom layer. I then place some medium thickness adhesive around the edges, making sure I cover the entire surface. I then place the crushed dolomite around the edges on top of the CA, making sure I'm coming up flush to the cardboard. Next, I cover the entire surface area of the crushed dolomite with some super thin CA adhesive. This stuff has capillary action, which allows the CA to get all the way to the bottom of the dolomite. Now I'm applying some more medium thickness CA to the top of the cardboard, and I'm going to place the middle layer now. I've also placed some medium CA on the underside of the second layer. Now I'm just going to repeat the same steps from the first layer with the second layer. With the top layer, I'm going to apply the medium CA to the entire surface. Then I'm going to cover the entire top layer with the crushed dolomite to simulate the icing on top of the cake. And then I'm going to cover the entire surface of the dolomite with the super thin CA to hold it in place. Here I'm just adding some more crushed dolomite in between each layer, just to make the icing in between look a little more uniform. And again, just adding the super thin CA to hold it in place. And here I'm adding the glow powder in between each layer. And here I'm adding the crushed dolomite to the back of the cake, similar to how I added it to the top of the cake. Here I'm adding a little bit of adhesive spray to the surface so that when I add the glow powder, it will stick. And here I'm adding the glow powder, making sure it's going on evenly. And here I'm adding the sprinkles to the top of the cake. For this I'm using rubies, emeralds, sapphires, and amethyst. And don't worry, I'm not using jewelry grade emeralds, rubies, and sapphires. These are low-grade uncut stones. Makers Challenge video. Chase and I are enjoying some actual carrot cake. Today's my birthday. As you can see outside, we got a dumping of snow. So spring might have sprung in Nova Scotia, but sometimes in April we can get some snow. But anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Let us know in the comments what you think of our cake. As always, have a great week. We'll catch you in the next one.